with today's lesson where we're going to be looking at the origin of constituencies. Alright, purpose. Congress can be viewed as the citizen's direct link to the branch of government that is responsible for public policy. Alright, so Congress, when we look at public policy, all we're really talking about here are the laws that are passed that have to be abided by with the citizenship. Alright, Congress represents constituents. You're a constituent. Congress has to represent you. They make laws on your behalf. Alright, so Congress represents constituents. They make laws. They provide oversight of governmental agencies. So they're going to pull budgets. They are going to look at efficiency reports. They're going to look at all sorts of different things to make sure that these agencies are doing their job. They're going to clarify policy. So if people don't understand what's going on with a law or it's not being implemented the way it's supposed to be, they're going to clarify that to make sure that it's done correctly. And they're going to ratify public policy, which just means that they're going to pass it. Alright. Congress asserts its authority from Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution. That says that all legislative powers herein are granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and a House of Representatives. And we will get into it more so as far as exactly what that means as we go through this unit. Constituents. Congressmen represent what are known as constituents. Constituents reside in the state or district that the congressman is elected to represent. Senators represent the entire state, while representatives represent their individual district. Alright, so we look at it, there are a number of representatives that exist for each state, and each representative is going to only be responsible for representing a small portion of the state. And what we'll do is later on I'll be able to post some links that kind of show you the different districts and things like that that exist within the state of Florida and throughout the rest of the United States. Alright, and we've talked about it with senators real briefly in the last unit, and then we'll look at it a lot during this unit, is that there are 2 senators for each state, regardless of the population of that state. And they're going to represent the entire state. How constituencies are determined. So like we just said, senators represent an entire state, and each state has 2 senators regardless of population. This is determined by Article 1, Section 3 of the Constitution. Representatives represent a specific district within their respective states. This is determined by Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution. The number of districts that exist in each state is determined every 10 years based upon data from the census. So every 10 years, the census is circulated. People are required by federal law to fill out the census. That doesn't necessarily mean that everybody does it, but they're required by law to participate in the census. So then there are 2 things that are done after the census is taken. The first thing that they look at is the concept of reapportionment. Reapportionment is the process of changing how many representatives exist in each state. So, if you get a whole bunch more population relative to everybody else, then you'll get more representatives. If you lose population compared to other states, then you will lose representation. So reapportionment is the process of changing the number of representatives that you have in each state. After you have changed the number of representatives for each state, you then need to redraw the districts. So the actual redrawing of the lines are known as redistricting. Okay, so reapportionment is changing the number of people. Redistricting is actually physically changing the lines. The purpose of a district is to determine the constituency a representative will represent. Districts are supposed to be drawn so that they are geographically contiguous, so that they are compact in shape, and that they are roughly equal in population. Okay, so it being geographically contiguous means that all of the lines touch. That it's not like where you've got a little bit here on one part of the state and a little bit here on the other part of the state. So they have to be one continuous mass. Compact in shape, that's a relative concept, and when we look at the actual maps that exist in the state of Florida, it could be argued that they're not all that compact in shape. And especially when you look at other districts throughout the country, there are some major issues with that concept and whether or not that's actually enforced. And they're supposed to be roughly equal in population to ensure that the votes in one constituency, in one district, are roughly equal to the power of the vote in another place. There are times, however, when districts are gerrymandered. Gerrymandering is when districts are drawn with odd shapes in favor of the political power in the state making the changes. Now, the thing that we have to understand about gerrymandering is that gerrymandering is not illegal. Gerrymandering is not an illegal concept. If you break the tenets that we talked about just a few minutes ago, that they're the three things that have to exist when you redraw districts, then that would be illegal. If you try and draw a district that is overwhelmingly discriminatory based upon race and things like that, then that can be held as unconstitutional. However, the pure process of redrawing a line so that it favors one specific political party, as long as you follow the other guidelines, that is not illegal. And that's going to be done because it's the state legislators that are responsible for the redrawing of the lines. So if the Democrats dominate the state legislator, then of course they're going to redraw the lines in a way that's going to help them be reelected and keep their power. Same thing would happen on the flip side. If the Republicans dominated the state legislature, then they are as well going to make sure that they draw those lines in a way that favors them. So when we look at the idea of gerrymandering, there are a couple of Supreme Court cases that we should be familiar with so that we can understand how some of these things have come apart. So Baker v. Carr, which happened in 1962, in this case, it established the principle of one man, one vote. This decision created guidelines for drawing up congressional districts and guaranteed a more equitable system of representation to the citizens of each state. So what had happened was, in this case, is that there were certain districts that had so many more people compared to other districts that had very few people that their vote didn't count as much. So you got to think about it. If there's only 100 people in your district and you vote and you're one of those 100, then you make up 1% of the power there. Now, if there are 1,000 people within your district, then you're going to have your vote is going to carry very much smaller power. So that is why it is required that there be roughly equal population when we look at the makeup of these constituencies and these districts. The other court case that you should be familiar with when it comes to gerrymandering is the court case of Westbury v. Sanders, and this takes place in 1964. And this happened in Georgia, and it was determined that the congressional districts that had been drawn in Georgia were so unequal that the population within these were so unequal that it was unconstitutional. So this is another court case that looks at the idea of that one man, one vote concept and forces those who redraw the districts to do a better job to make them more equitable.